Have you ever heard a ghost story so compelling, so widely witnessed, that it blurs the line between folklore and fact? Tonight, we journey into one of the most chilling and bizarre chapters in aviation history. This is the story of Eastern Airlines Flight 401, a state-of-the-art jumbo jet that met a tragic end, and the ghostly legacy that haunted the skies for years to come. It was December 29, 1972. Flight 401, a brand new Lockheed L1011 TriStar, was on its final approach to Miami International Airport. On board were 163 passengers and 13 crew members, many returning home for the holidays. The cockpit was manned by a veteran crew, Captain Robert Loft, a 32-year veteran of Eastern Airlines, First Officer Albert Stockstill, and Second Officer Donald Repo, the flight engineer. The mood was calm, routine. As they prepared for landing, the crew noticed that the landing gear indicator lighter, small green light, confirming the nose gear was down and locked had unilluminated. It was a tiny problem, likely just a burnt-out bulb. Captain Loft put the plane on autopilot at an altitude of 2,000 feet, circling over the dark, vast expanse of the Florida Everglades, while the crew tried to troubleshoot the issue. Second Officer Don Repo descended into the hellhole, a small avionics bay beneath the cockpit, to visually check if the landing gear was down. The other two pilots became engrossed in the problem, their attention completely focused on that single, malfunctioning light bulb. In those critical moments, no one noticed a devastatingly simple mistake. Someone had accidentally bumped the autopilot control column. The plane, ever so slowly, began to descend. The night was pitch black. There were no city lights over the Everglades, no visual cues to signal their deadly descent. By the time an alarm sounded and the pilots realized what was happening, it was too late. At 11:42 p.m., Eastern Airlines Flight 401 slammed into the swamp at over 200 miles per hour, disintegrating on impact. The crash was catastrophic. Of the 176 people on board, 101 lost their lives, including Captain Loft, who died in the wreckage, and First Officer Stockstill. Second Officer Don Repo was pulled alive from the twisted metal but died the next day in the hospital. It was a tragedy born from a moment of distraction, a grim reminder of how a minor issue can lead to disaster. But this is where our story takes a turn from tragedy to the truly paranormal. As the investigation concluded and the world mourned, Eastern Airlines made a practical decision. To save money, they salvaged undamaged parts from the wreckage of Flight 401 and installed them as replacement parts in other L1011 TriStar jets in their fleet. Parts from the galley, overhead bins, and other sections were recycled and put back into service. Soon after, strange reports began to surface from flight crews across the Eastern Airlines fleet. The reports were eerily similar, and they all seemed to center on planes that had received parts from the doomed Flight 401. Flight attendants started seeing the face of a man in the reflection of an oven in a galley. When they'd look again, he'd be gone. But multiple attendants, on different flights and different days, described the same man. They described Second Officer Don Repo. When a maintenance crew was called to inspect the oven, they discovered it was one of the units salvaged from Flight 401. The sightings became more frequent, more direct. A flight captain and 2 flight attendants on a flight to Miami swore they saw and spoke to a man in a Captain S uniform sitting in a passenger seat. They recognized him as the late Captain Robert Loft. He seemed concerned, as if he was watching over the flight. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, he vanished before their eyes. The crew was so shaken that the flight was cancelled. Later, it was confirmed that the jet they were on, TriStar 318, had been fitted with numerous parts from Flight 401. On another flight, a flight attendant saw the face of Don Repo looking out of an oven. She called over the flight engineer, who also saw him. The ghostly apparition spoke. He said, "Watch out for fire on this airplane." The crew was on high alert for the rest of the flight. Later in the journey, one of the engines failed and had to be shut down. The plane landed safely on its remaining 2 engines, but the incident could have been far worse. It was as if Repo was still on duty, still looking out for his crew. The stories spread like wildfire throughout the airline. Pilots and flight attendants would check maintenance logs before a flight, refusing to fly on planes they knew contained parts from Flight 401. The apparitions were unjust fleeting glimpses. They were interactive. A female passenger on a flight to Atlanta became concerned about a pale, quiet man in an Eastern Airlines uniform sitting next to her. She tried to make small talk, but he seemed unresponsive. Alarmed, she called a flight attendant. As the flight attendant looked at the man, she gasped in horror and ran to get the captain. The man she saw was Don Repo. By the time she returned with the captain, the uniformed man was gone, leaving an empty seat. The passenger was moved, completely shaken by the experience. These weren't isolated incidents reported by 1 or 2 people. We're talking about dozens of sightings, witnessed by highly credible individuals, captains, first officers, and veteran flight attendants. Even a vice president of Eastern Airlines, who was flying as a passenger, reported seeing Captain Loft in the first-class cabin. He sat down and spoke with the apparition, only realizing who he was talking to after the ghost disappeared. The airline's management was in a bind. Publicly, they denied the stories, threatening employees with dismissal if they were caught spreading ghost tales. They tried to brush it all under the carpet. But privately, they were so concerned that they allegedly ordered all the salvaged parts from Flight 401 to be removed from their fleet. Some sources even claim that an exorcism was performed on one of the planes. After these parts were reportedly removed, the sightings of Captain Loft and Don Repo suddenly stopped. The ghosts of Flight 401, it seemed, had finally found peace. So, what are we to make of all this? Was it a case of mass hysteria, fueled by the grief and trauma of a terrible crash? It's possible. The airline industry is a tight-knit community, and the shock of the Flight 401 disaster was deeply felt. Perhaps the stories were a way for crews to process the tragedy, but the sheer number of witnesses and the consistency of their accounts make it hard to dismiss. These were sober, professional people, responsible for hundreds of lives, reporting the same apparitions on different planes, at different times. They saw Bob Loft and Don Repo still at their posts, still watching over their airline. This theory is often called the stone tape theory, the idea that inanimate objects, especially those present during intense emotional events, can somehow record and replay those events. Could the salvaged parts of Flight 401 have carried a psychic imprint of the final, tragic moments of its crew? Did the spirits of Captain Loft and Second Officer Repo attach themselves to the wreckage, their sense of duty so strong that it transcended even death? The story of the ghosts of Flight 401 has become a modern legend, documented in books and even a television movie. It serves as a haunting reminder of the human element in aviation and the profound impact of tragedy. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the tale of the phantom crew members is a testament to the dedication of those who fly the friendly skies. It suggests that for some, the duty to protect and serve doesn't end even after the final flight. What do you think? Were the ghosts of Flight 401 real, or was it a legend born from grief? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thanks for joining me on this journey into the haunted skies. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more explorations into the unknown. Fly safe, and see you next time.